Welcome to lesson 7 of Financial Sobriety School. My name's Linda Parmar. I am a financial sobriety expert. Lesson 7. Oh my goodness, this is a lesson that is very, very near and dear to me because it is part of my process with so much stuff with my sobriety because I felt like I have been in survival mode in many, many times in my sobriety. And I think that a lot of the times that I spent actively in my addiction was complete survival mode. Complete, like, this is what I am doing to cope, right? That we've talked a lot about how filling voids within ourselves with our spending, or with our drug of choice, right? If you're that's still part of your story. I know with alcohol, that was part of my story. It was just that whole just stuffing everything down until it kept kind of bubbling up. And survival mode. Is that something you've experienced with your money? You probably have. And it's probably maybe even something that you are in right now. And a lot of times people are stuck in that cycle that keeps them in that survival mode. And so what I mean by that is it's like the game of whack-a-mole, and I've said that a few times. That's what financial sobriety, or that's what sobriety overall can feel like, because it's like, okay, got that thing done, whack that mole. Okay, bump, done that one, whack that mole, right? And I don't know if you've ever played that game at the carnival or the fair, or whatever you call it, but it's like by the end of it, I'm sweating and it's just like, "Oh my god, how come there's so many moles? How come there is so many moles that I have to whack, and I'm freaking exhausted, and get me out of here." Plus it's really loud because that crazy music is playing. Like, my sensory overload is just too much. Enough about the fair. But it just feels like when we're dropping one thing, it's like, oh, there's something comes back up again. Let's whack that out of there. And for me, what survival mode looked like for my money was, I also call it like robbing Peter to pay Paul, in regards to you're just kind of grasping at things constantly and figuring out some sort of plan to make that payment, be able to do this, go on this vacation, buy that thing. Oh, maybe I can get a new credit card. Oh, maybe I can take money out of my retirement fund. Oh, wait. Oh, cool. There's a pre-approved credit card. I'm going to take that and then do a balance transfer and then pay off everything. And then we're right back to where we started again. And as I was saying that, you probably heard like the heightened feeling, and you probably felt that too, right? Because that's what it feels like. Money can feel very, very hectic, and it can feel so much like we're out of control. And, I call it survival mode. And I think that when I was really in my active addiction with my overspending and spending money, there was part of me that knew what I was doing, right? Like that I was getting away with something. And there was a high that came with figuring out what I was going to do to survive. I just had a huge aha moment about that within myself. And when I said that out loud, I felt that so much in my body. Whew. Oh, can take me a second. I And that's, like where that high comes from. And I often talk about like that retail therapy and buying something, and that gives you that dopamine hit. But I have actually not thought until right this moment that high that I used to get when I used to figure out a plan to like hide it all and to like kind of wrap it up in a little bow so that it didn't look as bad as it really was. That was my survival mode. And I would feel so proud of myself in that moment. It's like, "Oh, yeah, like, I've tricked the system, like, I've got this all under control. Oh, great, I can take out that money out of my retirement fund, and, oh, good, they're gonna unlock it for me, and, oh, yay, I get to do this." And then, like, that's where it's just like that cycle, right? That cycle of that survival. And knowing what I was doing, but also not acknowledging that it was a really bad problem in regards to, like, addictive behavior. I think I had been so focused on being sober, right, and not drinking and trying to deal with feelings. Um, Also, like, what is that? That's the hardest part about recovery and sobriety is those raw feelings. And I had no idea that I was trying to soften that rawness with spending. I had no idea I was doing that. But what I did know was that I was spending too much money. I did know that I was constantly working out a scheme to be able to, keep my hustle going. Like, it was like a hustle. That's what it felt like. It absolutely felt like a hustle. And then that high when it was like, "Oh my goodness, yes, I've got my hustle figured out," like almost like you're the deal of the day, and you get your if you're dope sick and all of a sudden you get the deal done with your dealer. Oh my goodness. And so much is coming up for me around that as I started to talk about this, and I haven't thought about that part of it. And this is the beautiful part about financial sobriety is you keep learning. And this gives me so much to look at in regards to why I'm even recording this lesson in general is forgiving ourselves for what we needed to do to survive. And to actually think that through of, that high that I did used to get when I could figure out how to make payments and, hide my mess. And I didn't even think of that to be a part of why that really kept me there. And, you're seeing and hearing this of watching me process this, hearing me process this in regards to no wonder I kept going and doing that. That felt really good, right? Like, and it wasn't the right thing to do, and I know that. And but at the same point, like, I was just so stuck in that addictive cycle. And that's where it's like, where can I start to have the sorry, you can hear my voice probably shaking. Where can I find that forgiveness for that woman who was so scared and so angry and so full of shame that she had no idea what to do? And I worked in a system as a banker who taught me what to do. And not that taking money out of retirement funds is what I was teaching as a financial advisor or what the bank taught us to do, but at the same time, it was accessible. And I saw my, coworkers doing it all the time. And it felt like it gave me that permission to do that. And when you have a lot of access to stuff online, it's so easy just to like, oh, I'm going to move funds here, move them there. But it was exhausting. It was so exhausting that every month I had to try to figure out how things were gonna get paid and how could I hide this? How can I hide this? And and I was always trying to, yes, hide it, but at the same time, there was part of me that believed that it was all gonna be okay. When I Yeah, like, I thought that if I did all of this movement of the money, like, okay, it's good for now, but it was a Band-Aid for, like, the fact that it was a Band-Aid over a blistering fucking wound, and I just kept putting that Band-Aid on, right? It's like, "Oh, I'm okay right now, put that Band-Aid on," and thank God there's a bottom like, I didn't hit rock bottom where I lost everything. My bottom kinda came up and hit me, just like it did with my alcohol addiction. I don't have a crazy story about, like, my life getting completely out of control, and that doesn't matter. My story is my story in regards to I was addicted to alcohol and drinking alcohol, and I was addicted to spending money, and that whole process, that addictive stuff just took over with my money the exact same way it was doing with my drinking. And I have done so much work to forgive myself for what I did drinking, like, and not that I had like big things that I needed to make big amends to people or anything, but I had to apologize and to myself for what I put my body through, what I just kept ignoring and until I was ready, and that's okay. And then there's what can you forgive yourself for what you did needed to do to survive with your money? What was that? And a lot of that for me was, taking money out of the retirement funds, constantly like restructuring debt, balance transfers, just constantly putting those band-aids over that blistering wound until, I had that moment of, okay, I'm going to lose everything here. Like this, this wound is like, it needs to go to the ICU and it needs some attention, or the ER. And yes, I'm just so, so grateful that I can look through it through a lens of no longer blaming myself for what I did. I was caught up in my addictive cycle. I was caught up in all of that. And and I think that if you're listening to this and you're resonating with it, you are too. And giving yourself that permission to maybe start to think, hey, instead of me hitting rock bottom, how can I maybe have my bottom come up and hit me and start to make decisions now? Can I listen to Linda and see her and like I that emotion and what's running through my body right now for remembering what that felt like. And it's kind of like goes back to that the body keeps score of like that physical manifestation that starts. And I have such deep gratitude for my survival skills in my addictive cycles. And I'm also really, really grateful that I can now see that those were addictive cycles and I was in control of nothing. The addiction was controlling me, and I can forgive myself for that. And those were the hardest times I've ever been through when it comes to having my bottoms come up and hit me with my alcohol addiction and with my spending addiction. And if there's one thing you hear in this today is that, maybe let's start to look at things and what am I doing to survive? And what can I do to like forgive myself and maybe start to make different decisions and maybe start to do our work on our money? Because you don't have to live in survival mode. You don't have to live in that addictive cycle. And that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing with Financial Sobriety School, because you are not alone. And I really hope that this message reaches you today and gives you some hope. And I talk a lot about completing the stress cycle when it comes to thinking about stuff that happens with us and our money. And I cannot believe the aha moment I had and a layer of my spending addiction that I had a huge realization about today. And I'm so, so happy that I was able to have that. But at the same time, I could really feel it in my body. And I am going to take my dogs. I'm going to go out in the woods and I am going to go and take some really deep breaths and be really grateful for the woman who's showing up today for herself, for her community, for Financial Sobriety School, so you guys can learn from me. And that's my mission in life, and I'm so glad you got to witness that today because, it's an honor to be able to share my heart with you, and thank you so much for listening and holding that space for me while I'm doing that, because as much as I'm holding that space for you, I know that there's, moments where, you're also holding that space for me, so I'm super, super grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and I will see you next week for lesson 8. Bye.